our way to the number one song in the USA, and this next one followed that path on the Black Singles Chart. It's the number one song in that chart, and now it crosses over and makes our countdown too. The first chart single for a singer out of New York City named Keith Sweat. I Want Her. She's so bad. Casey's Top 40. I'm Casey Kasem. We're counting down the most popular records on this week's Pop Singles Chart. Now we're up to the latest hit for Keith Sweat, a singer-songwriter who grew up half a block from one of the most famous theaters in the world, a theater that's the Carnegie Hall of black music. That theater is located in the historic black community of Harlem in New York City. In its heyday during the 20s and 30s, Harlem was known as the capital of black America. Political leaders, writers, businessmen, and performers, everybody who was anybody went there. Back in 1934, two men, Frank Schiffman and Leo Brecker, bought an old Harlem theater called the Apollo and started putting on live shows. Over the years, the audiences there became known as the most difficult to please in the entire world. Every black entertainer knew that if you were good enough for an Apollo audience, you were good enough for any audience. And so the list of performers to appear at the Apollo is legendary, including James Brown, Nat King Cole, Gladys Knight, Moms Mabley, The Temptations, Marvin Gaye, Michael Jackson, Jackie Wilson, Ray Charles, and so many, many more. You name them, they were there. Well, when he was young, singer Keith Sweat lived right down the street from the Apollo, and that's what helped shape his musical dreams. Every day he'd walk by the theater, stop and look at the posters of upcoming shows. He'd stare at the pictures of the legends who'd been there before, dreaming of the day that he might perform on that stage. Eventually, Keith's dream came true. He got to perform at the Apollo, first as an opening act, and later as a headliner. And like every act who stood on that stage before him, Keith says winning that audience over finally made him know for sure that he's got what it takes. This week, the man who lived down the street from history is playing for an audience from coast to coast and around the world. Keith Sweat moves up 3 notches this week to number 29 on Casey's Top 40 with Make You Sweat.
Number 20!
Hi, this is Keith Sweat, and I want to make you sweat, ladies, here on the American Top 40. Here's my new single, Make You Sweat. Hi, I'm Keith Sweat, and you're listening to The Shadow on American Top 40, and he'll sweat out more hot hits in a few minutes.
I'm Casey Kasem, counting down the biggest hits in the USA. Now, here's a singer from Harlem who says as a teenager, he got a lot of musical inspiration watching Elvis Presley movies. The singer just loved how Elvis had the audience in the palm of his hand, and he wondered if he could do that someday. Well, now he's getting a chance. Edging up a notch to number 13, this is Keith Sweat with I'll Give All My Love to You.
Casey's Top 40.
I'm Mark Elliott in for Casey Kasem, and we're on our way to the number one song in the USA. And now we're up to the latest hit for one of the hottest R&B performers around, a man named Sweat who's so hot he once made a nightclub perspire. Keith Sweat has a reputation as one of the most intense performers around today. His shows are almost always sold out weeks in advance, and when he's on stage, he gives himself to the crowd, body and soul. By the end of a performance, Keith Sweat is always drenched in perspiration, and his audience is pretty hot under the collar as well. And on one unforgettable occasion, even the club Keith was performing in was wet, dripping wet. Keith told us it happened about 2 years ago. He was on a tour of small clubs, and he wound up playing in a really intimate nightclub in Boston in the middle of the worst heat wave the city had gone through in years. The temperature was beating 100 degrees during the day, and it wasn't getting much cooler at night. When Keith hit the stage in Boston, he was already drenched. And though the air conditioning was working as hard as it could, it wasn't doing anything at all. In fact, with all those dancing bodies in the club, the air conditioning was creating a lot of condensation on the walls. Kind of like what happens in a refrigerator that's been left open too long. Well, Keith says, quote, "It was unbelievable. I was soaked in sweat. And I noticed there was sweat dripping off the ceiling. It was running down the walls. There were puddles forming on the stage. The place was definitely damp." Well, you can catch the feeling of the heat of a Keith Sweat performance by listening to his latest hit. It's survey song number 12 on Casey's Top 40. Keep it coming.
Casey's Top 40.
Hi, This is Casey Kasem. Singer Keith Sweat has a hot new hit, the song Twisted. This week it twisted its way up 9 strong notches to number 25 to become our biggest mover. Now can Keith Sweat keep on moving up the survey and score his second top 10? We'll find out as we count down all the biggest hits and check out the latest music news on Casey's Top 40 from Westwood One Entertainment.
Casey's Top 40.
I'm Casey Kasem. Well, now we're up to Twisted. It's by a singer who says he learned some of his most important lessons for success when he worked on Wall Street. Before he became an R&B and pop singer, Keith Sweat worked as a brokerage assistant in New York's financial district. Keith worked there on and off for about 5 years. And during that time, he kept his eyes and ears open. Among the lessons he learned was that a company often did best when it had total control over its product. And that's why he's always insisted that he produce his own albums. Over the past 9 years, he's produced 5 of them. Keith said his time on Wall Street also taught him that it's important for a company to diversify. And that's just what he's done with his music. His musical styles range from dance to ballads, and he diversifies his work as well. He doesn't just sing and produce albums for himself. He makes records for others through his production company. And if that weren't enough diversification, Keith has also used his business knowledge to open a state-of-the-art recording studio, a nightclub, and a restaurant. This week, Keith Sweat's business world is in very good shape, and his stock is going straight up. This is Keith Sweat and Twisted.
Counting them down with Casey Kasem.
Now, it's been said that behind every successful man, there's a woman pushing him on. And that's true in the case of a singer in our survey. Only in his case, that woman is his mother. Keith Sweat grew up in the rough Grant housing projects on 125th Street in New York's Harlem. He says a lot of kids he knew there went on to get into trouble with the law. Some went to jail, and some went to an early grave. But in the case of Keith, that was a road he never traveled, because his mother was always there trying to push him in the right direction. Keith says he was in his early teens when his father died back in 1973. His mother, Juanita, was a hairdresser who often worked 2 and even 3 jobs to make sure her family had food on the table and a roof over their head. And she controlled her family with a firm hand, making sure her children knew that they were going to succeed in the world no matter how strong the temptations to lose their way. Keith says, "She pushed me hard." While attending school during the day, he got a job working as a stock boy at Macy's during the night. From there, he went to New York City College and then to a job on Wall Street. His mother also gave him the confidence to pursue a recording career. And the result of all that encouragement through the years is that Keith Sweat has been a success in everything he's tried. A success, he says, he owes to his mother. And this week, the man who's made his mother so proud is at number 32 on Casey's Top 40, Keith Sweat with Nobody, featuring Athena Cage.
Casey's Top 40.
I'm Casey Kasem. These are the most popular songs in the USA. Dropping 3 notches to number 37 is Keith Sweat, a singer known for his smooth moves. At each show on his last tour, he would select a woman from the audience, escort her to the dinner table on stage, and then offer her a glass of champagne as he serenaded her.
I wanna see you.
Moving down from number 34 to 37, that's a song that's been in our survey since January. Nobody by Keith Sweat, featuring Athena Cage. On Casey's Top 40, I'm Casey Kasem.
Casey's Top